Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Nitsch. I'm just making a summary writing. I want you to understand the comments that I've left on your activity journals. So those are graded. This is the activity journal that you did on Monday. And I think people are struggling with what I mean by a summary, and Chapter 2 may not give you enough information. And the earlier video must not have been helpful enough. So I'm just going to give you a little bit more clarity in terms of what I'm looking for. So I've got here 2 examples of a focused summary paragraph. They're focused on processed foods. So just so you can see, focused summary. And I also wanted you to write an overall summary. What are all the main ideas, not just the ideas about processed food that Pollen has. But even so, I think this will show you what I'm looking for. So a lot of you wrote paragraphs like this. So I'm going to show you how these paragraphs have some issues. It's tricky because they echo ideas in the article, but they're a little too far away from the original ideas. And they also don't tell us that these are Pollen's ideas. Remember, the purpose of a summary is always to relate somebody else's argument, and you want to do it in your own words, and you want to do it, but you want to do it accurately. So you want to make sure that you capture exactly what they're communicating to us. So I'll read this one. Processed foods are bad for our health. We find them, processed food, everywhere, though that is part of the problem. They often make people feel terribly ill and cause serious health problems like diabetes or heart disease. I agree with Michael Pollan about the Western diet. So all of these sentences sound like they're my ideas, Dr. Nitsch's ideas, not Michael Pollan's ideas. The only way we would know that these are Michael Pollan's ideas is we would have to say Michael Pollan argues. You're going to get into Chapter 3 soon, and that's going to give you some really nice verbs to help you use so that you can not just say he says, he says, he says, so you can accurately and concretely, specifically reflect how the information is being presented. But I'm just going to use argues here. So that helps because that makes it more accurate. And Michael Pollan does say we find them everywhere, and then that's part of the problem. So you'd want to change this too, right, to reflect that this is an idea of Pollan's. Pollan notes how we find them everywhere, though, and that is part of the problem. Some of this he doesn't say. He doesn't say explicitly that processed foods cause diabetes and heart disease. He says the entire Western diet does. So it's not just the processed food, it's the eating quickly, it's the not preparing your own food, not being together with other people. So you want to be careful that you stay close to what he actually says. So this one I would take out and rework it. I would go back to the book, go back to the article, and make sure I'm thinking about very specific sentences from the article that I'm trying to put in my own words. And then this is, I agree with Michael Pollan. You don't agree in the actual summary. So you want to take that out. At this stage, you're not agreeing or disagreeing. In the activity journal, this might have been confusing. But I said, right, as if you're going to put this summary paragraph in an argument essay that you are writing, a response essay where you agree with Michael Pollan. The summary is separate from the statement of agreement. Some of you kind of mixed them up all together. So some of this is redeemable. Some of it's not. Let me show you the start of a more successful one. And because I really want you to understand Michael Pollan's argument on your own, I'm not going to give you the whole summary. This paragraph, if I was going to finish it, this paragraph would probably be about 4 more sentences longer too. So people, make sure you're reading carefully, you're reading closely about all the stuff he says about processed food. It's not just in one place in the article. So according to journalist Michael Pollan, the Western diet, or the American food culture of processed cheap food, is slowly killing us. He addresses the problem of processed food specifically, considering that the industry is adept or good at responding to health fads to engineer food that sounds good for us, but really is not. So I'm starting to get in a very specific reference, a very specific idea, not just general stuff about processed food, right? We want to make sure that we're capturing exactly what Michael Pollan says about it, not just what we may already think about it. And that's on page 422. It's in the paragraph on 422. So there's other very specific things he says about processed food in other paragraphs. You want to make sure that you're paying close attention. You often, if you're writing a focused summary, you want to read the article again and just pay attention, very, very careful attention to the sections where he's talking about the topic that you're interested in. That's just so you don't start going on autopilot and start saying things you think are true about processed food. This is a very specific idea that the processed food industry creates food that sounds healthy. And that is something Pollan thinks is a problem because he thinks it can never be healthy, that if it's processed, it's always bad. But he's got other more complicated things to say about processed food. So don't forget that. Don't forget that. Some other things that let me know or give the signal that this is a summary. So it begins with saying who this guy is. He's a journalist, the author. Oh, I forgot one more thing. According to the journalist Michael Pollan, in the article, we would need that to escape from the Western diet. And what's nice about that is now any reader knows whose argument you're talking about. They know it's Michael Pollan, they know who he is, and they could go and find that article and understand that you're talking about that particular discussion. So include the title. And then the second part of this first sentence of my summary is what I think the thesis of this article is. What I think the thesis of Escape from the Western Diet is. The main idea is that the Western diet, which is American food culture of processed cheap food, is slowly killing us. So I start with that thesis, and then I start getting more specific. He addresses the problem of processed food specifically, because that's what I'm summarizing, his ideas about processed food, considering that the industry is adept at responding to health fads to engineer food that sounds good for us, but really is not. And again, like I said, I'd probably add 4 more sentences to this. But if you notice in the second sentence, we have he, or we could have a Pollan. Instead of just says, we have addresses. And then this is specific. This is not just my own idea about processed food. This is what Michael Pollan says in my own words on page 422. So in your summary, you need to be able to do that. You need to be able to go take your paraphrase, the sentence of Pollan's idea in your own words, and then you need to find that idea. It's on page 424 in the third paragraph. You need to be able to identify it like that. Otherwise, you probably aren't reading very closely, and you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to say things that aren't accurate or just aren't specific enough to be relevant. So I bring all this up because you're going to write a focused summary and an overall summary for me on the 25th. And I want you to do as good of a job as you can. I also want you just to get more familiar with the genre of writing summaries because you have to write them a lot in college. So I hope this short video has helped. If it hasn't, please send me questions because I can answer those either through a video or a written answer and share those with the class. So thank you for your attention.